Taking a job from Craigslist was something I never imagined I'd do. It wasn't that I thought I was above it. I had just heard far too many horror stories about sketchy meetings, people not showing up, scams, or even worse. But there are times when life puts you in a squeeze until all of the safe choices are gone. It all began 3 weeks after I lost my full-time position at the front desk of a dental office. They were downsizing. I had been living by myself in a studio apartment in East Morrow, getting by on my savings and any odd jobs I could find. The deadline for my rent was getting closer. When I reached a point of desperation, I sent a message to my friend, Emily, who was always juggling 2 or 3 side hustles. She told me she had done some babysitting jobs through Craigslist in the past. Just be sure to vet them carefully, she had warned. Don't go into it blind. Ask a lot of questions. Always trust your gut. I had done a lot of babysitting in high school and college, and I was good with kids. I assumed it couldn't be that much different now. It's really just about keeping children safe and alive for a few hours. The first couple of listings I looked at were either too vague or seemed shady. But then I found one that looked normal. Almost too normal. The Craigslist post read, "Child care needed, Saturday evening. Hi, we're looking for a sitter for our 2 boys this Saturday, ages 6 and 9, from around 5:30 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. Our household is pretty relaxed. We just need someone responsible while we head out for an anniversary dinner. The pay is $120 for the evening. Please message for address details. Thanks, Chloe M." Something about that post felt secure. It was simple. The tone was relaxed. The pay was good, but not so high that it seemed suspicious. I sent a reply. An hour later, Chloe messaged me back with the address and a short note. "Thanks so much for replying. My husband and I will be leaving just after 5:30. The boys are Isaac and Dylan. They're super easy. They will have already eaten dinner. Just TV, games, and maybe some reading before bed. It should be a quiet night." We exchanged a couple more messages. She came across as normal, even nice. She signed off with a smiley face emoji. It made me feel a little foolish for being so wary. Even so, I did my homework. I looked up the address, 1585 Brookfield Lane, on Google. It was on a cul-de-sac just on the edge of town, near some older neighborhoods, but not so remote as to be a red flag. I sent the details to Emily just as a precaution. "Text me as soon as you get there," she replied. "And if anything seems off, just leave." It was a dry Saturday when I pulled into the cracked driveway at 5:18 p.m. The house was unassuming. A single-story home with peeling blue paint and overgrown bushes. A wind chime clinked on the porch awning. The porch light was on, even though it was still daylight. Something about that gave me a strange, tight feeling in my chest. It wasn't fear, just an anxiousness. I knocked on the door. There was no answer. I knocked again. This time, I could hear shuffling sounds from inside. When the door finally opened, a man was standing there. He looked to be in his late 50s, maybe early 60s. He was tall and thin, with thinning grey hair and a long, patchy beard. He was wearing a t-shirt with faded lettering and jeans that had paint splatters on them. He squinted at me as if he was having trouble seeing. "Well, you the babysitter?" "Yeah, Chloe messaged me. She said to be here at 5:30. Right, he said, scratching his head. "She just stepped out with the boys to get some snacks or something. You can come on in, though. She'll be back in 5 minutes. The way he was looking at me made my spine tense up. But I didn't want to rush to judgment. I walked inside. The house had a smell of dust and old cooking oil. The front room was filled with clutter. Boxes, stacks of newspapers, and one single recliner. The air felt heavy and stale. "Sorry about the mess," he said as he shut the door behind me. I heard the lock click. "We're, doing some reorganizing." "No worries," I lied. He pointed down a narrow hallway. "The living room is back there. There's a TV and a couch. You can wait in there." As I walked, I took a look around. I didn't see any toys, or kids' drawings or backpacks. There were no photos of children, just plain beige walls, generic framed art, and dust. I sat down on a worn-out brown couch. My phone buzzed. It was Emily. "You good?" I texted back, "Weird vibe, but okay for now. Chloe's not here yet. Just the husband." He walked past the hallway again, mumbling something I couldn't hear. He was pacing. Every few minutes, he would peek into the living room and say things like, "She should have been back by now," or, "Sorry about this. It's just bad timing." The whole situation was starting to feel like an act. At 5:45, I got to my feet. "I think I might just go," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. He looked panicked. Wait, no. She's probably just downstairs. I didn't hear the front door earlier, so maybe she came in through the side entrance." He pointed to a door I hadn't seen before. It was in the kitchen, partially concealed by a curtain. She goes down there sometimes with the boys, for crafts and art stuff. She's probably just waiting for you. The house had become completely silent. I walked over to the door and opened it. The basement was pitch black. A cold, musty smell rose up to meet me. It was a mix of mold, dust, and something metallic, like the smell of rust. I stood there, frozen. "Go on," he said, his voice overly cheerful. "They're probably just getting set up." I didn't budge. My stomach churned. "Actually, I just got a text. I think my ride is here early. I've got to go. I'm so sorry. Maybe we can do this another time." I turned and ran toward the front door. Locked. He was right behind me. "Hang on a sec," he said, his voice now dry. "You haven't even met the kids." I was fumbling with the deadbolt, my heart pounding in my chest. Click. It unlocked. I didn't look back. I flew down the porch steps and ran across the lawn to my car. My hands were shaking as I unlocked it. Behind me, I could hear him yelling something. A name, a phrase, I don't know. It didn't matter. I slammed the car door shut and peeled out of the driveway. In my rearview mirror, I could see him standing in the front yard with his hands clenched into fists. I drove until I got to a grocery store parking lot about 10 minutes away. I parked, cried, and called Emily. She answered on the very first ring. "What happened?" I told her everything. "Call the cops," she said. "Right now." The dispatcher had a calm voice as I described the house, the man, and the fake babysitting job. She asked for the address and thanked me for calling it in. An officer called me about 2 hours later to follow up. I repeated the whole story to him. He said they would go check it out. That was the end of it, at least in an official capacity. 2 weeks went by. I did my best not to think about it. I found a temporary job at a pet supply store and tried to immerse myself in normal life. Then one evening, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number, a text message. "Hi there, we saw your babysitting profile online. We have 2 boys, ages 6 and 9, and need a sitter for this Saturday evening. The pay is $120 for the night. Let us know if you're available. Chloe M." It was the same wording, the same pay, but a different phone number. There was no way to trace the profile. I had never even created a public one. I blocked the number. 2 days later, another message arrived. Another different number. "Hey, found your ad. Looking for a sitter in the Brookfield area. 2 boys. It'll be an easy night. Let us know if you're free. Tom and Chloe." The next day, I changed my phone number. I moved 3 months after that to a new city and took Emily up on her offer to stay with her in Ridgewood until I was back on my feet. I never got another message from Chloe, but I have kept screenshots of every single message just in case. Sometimes, when I'm looking through job listings, I still see similar posts. The same tone, the same pay rate, but with different names and in different zip codes. And I wonder how many people didn't listen to their gut. How many of them walked down those basement stairs, and how many never came back up. I used to believe that the scariest part of selling something online was haggling with strangers who offered half your asking price. It never occurred to me that the real danger could come after the price was settled, or before it even had a chance to be. In 2017, I was 26 years old and still trying to make my way in Portland. I had just gotten a better paying job at a marketing firm, and for the first time in my life, I bought myself a new car, a silver Honda Civic. It was shiny, reliable and nothing extravagant, but it was all mine. The new car smell still lingered on the seats. And when I got behind the wheel, I felt like I was finally getting my life on track. But I still had my old Subaru Impreza parked in the driveway. That car had been with me through so much. It had taken me to college classes in Eugene, on late-night drives down the coast with friends, and on 2 cross-country trips where the radio barely worked, but the engine never gave up. It was more than just a car. It was a part of my 20s. The truth, however, was that it was falling apart. Rust was eating away at the wheel wells. An oil smell lingered no matter how many times I cleaned it. And the dented bumper from a fender bender the previous winter was a constant reminder that I wasn't invincible. Financially, I had to sell it. My loan on the Civic was significant, and getting even a couple of thousand for the Subaru would help ease the financial burden. The dealership's trade-in offer was insulting, barely over $1,000. So, like many people, I listed it on Craigslist. I cleaned the Impreza as well as I could, took pictures from every angle, and wrote a short, honest description. 2006 Subaru Impreza, $3,200 OBO. Runs well, 160k miles, some cosmetic wear. Good commuter car, clean title. I clicked post and waited. The first week was nothing but frustrating. One guy offered me $800 cash, today only. Another asked if I'd trade it for his dirt bike. A third wanted me to drive the car 3 hours away just so he could look at it. I laughed it all off, telling myself this was just part of the Craigslist experience. But one night, just as I was considering deleting the post, my phone buzzed with a new message. Still got the Impreza? I can pay close to asking if it's as clean as you say. Finally, someone who seemed serious. I texted back, trying to hide my eagerness. Yeah, still available. When would you like to meet? Maybe tomorrow, the reply came. Where are you located? That question made me pause. I'd heard enough horror stories about giving your home address to strangers, so I didn't fall for it. Target parking lot on any Vidler, I typed. It was a public place with cameras and lights, safe enough. The reply never came. Hours passed and turned into the next day. I assumed he was just another flake. Someone looking at cars they couldn't afford. I put it out of my mind until the following evening. Around 9:45 p.m, my phone buzzed again. I thought it was a work reminder, but it wasn't a text. It was a photo. It took me a moment to process what I was seeing. The picture was taken from a low, grainy angle, clearly in the dark. Then my stomach lurched. It was a photo of my Subaru parked in my driveway. A caption followed a few seconds later. Looks even better in person. My chest grew tight. My address wasn't in the ad. I hadn't shared it with anyone. My hands were shaking as I typed my reply. How did you get this photo? Who are you? There was no response. I sat on my couch with the blinds closed, clutching my phone and staring at the picture as if it could explain itself. My quiet street suddenly felt dangerously exposed. The maple trees outside seemed like they were witnesses to something sinister. I barely slept that night. Every crunch of tires on the gravel outside sent my pulse racing. Every shadow that moved across my blinds looked like a figure standing there, waiting. At 12:30 a.m., just as exhaustion was starting to pull me under, I heard a knock on the door. It wasn't a polite knock. It was sharp and deliberate. I froze on the couch, every nerve on high alert. Another knock followed, this time harder. I crept to the door, phone in hand, and looked through the peephole. A man was standing there, his hood pulled up, his face obscured by the shadows. He leaned in close to the door, his voice low but clear. I'm here for the Subaru. Open up, my blood ran cold. I backed away from the door, whispering to myself, Don't answer. Don't answer! The doorknob rattled. Then I heard the metallic scrape of something being pushed into the lock. Panic seized me. I stumbled into the kitchen, crouched behind the counter, and dialed 911 with trembling fingers. The dispatcher's calm voice helped cut through my terror. Stay quiet. Officers are on their way. Can you get to another room safely? I whispered back. He's trying to get in. He's right at my door. As if on cue, a loud bang echoed through the house, the sound of a shoulder hitting the wood. My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. Then silence, followed by the sound of footsteps on gravel, retreating into the night. Minutes felt like an eternity before red and blue lights washed over my curtains. I opened the door slowly, my legs weak, and explained everything to the police officers. The man, of course, was gone. The quiet street looked just as it always did, with one exception, the Subaru. There was a new sharp dent on the driver's side door, as if someone had kicked it in frustration. I pointed it out to the officers, who jotted down notes. They listened to my story, but didn't offer much hope. This happens more often than people realize, one of them said. You post a picture online, and even if you don't notice it, there's always something in the background, a tree, a house, that can give away your location. If someone is local and determined enough, they can find you. That thought made my skin crawl. My big red maple tree was clearly visible in the photo I had uploaded. All someone had to do was drive around my neighborhood until they found the right driveway. The officers left after taking my report, promising to do extra patrols but not much else. Standing in my living room, looking at the new dent in my car, I realized how close I had come to letting a complete stranger into my life and into my home. The next morning, I deleted the Craigslist ad. By the end of the week, I had driven the Impreza to a dealership and accepted their lowball offer without any argument. Losing that money stung, but not nearly as much as the memory of that knock on my door. For weeks, I lived in a constant state of paranoia. I installed heavier locks, put up motion sensor lights, and kept a baseball bat by my bed. But even with these precautions, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Every time I heard gravel crunch outside, I pictured that hooded figure standing there. Sometimes, I could have sworn I heard faint but deliberate footsteps on my driveway in the middle of the night. I never discovered who the man was or what he wanted besides the car. But I knew deep down that it wasn't just about the Subaru. He wanted something more. The photo, the knock, the attempt to get through my door. It wasn't just a bad buyer experience. It was a predator searching for an opportunity. That spring taught me a lesson I'll always carry with me. The internet may connect us, but it also leaves us vulnerable. A photo, a thoughtless detail, a moment of misplaced trust. It's all someone needs to find you. And the moral I learned the hard way is this: protect your privacy as if your life depends on it, because sometimes it actually does. When I think back on it, that November weekend in 2019 started out feeling completely normal. At 17, still in high school, my main interest was independence, not family get-togethers. My parents were invited to a family reunion in Yakima, a couple of hours away. For weeks, they went back and forth on whether to make me go. "Ellie, it's only one weekend," my mom had pleaded. But I wouldn't budge. I had argued for my independence before, but this was the first time they'd seriously thought about leaving me alone overnight. What my parents didn't know was that I had a plan of my own. For a few weeks, I'd been meaning to clear out the basement and figured I could earn some money by selling the old furniture on Craigslist. On Wednesday, I put up the ads, not giving it a second thought. That Friday night, I got a text. "Is the desk still available? I can pick it up tonight." After a brief hesitation, I sent my address. I didn't realize that one text message was about to lead to the most terrifying night I'd ever experienced. At precisely 9:00, there was a sharp, deliberate knock. Looking through the small window next to the door, I saw a tall, broad man with a baseball cap pulled down low. By the curb, a pickup truck was idling, and a second person was leaning against it. This was not what I was expecting. I opened the door just a crack, leaving the chain on. "Hi, are you the one interested in the desk?" The man nodded. "Yeah, can we come inside and look at it?" My gut instinct screamed at me. Something about him felt wrong. I said, stumbling over my words. "I could probably bring it out to you." His jaw clenched. "The desk is heavy. Just open the door." My chest felt tight. "Sorry, but my dad's rule is not to let strangers in." His smile then twisted into something menacing. "Then you probably shouldn't be selling stuff online." He pushed hard against the door, rattling the chain. I threw all my weight against it, slammed it shut, and locked the deadbolt. I was shaking so much I could barely dial 911. As the dispatcher was talking, I heard the sound of splintering wood from the hallway. They were breaking in. I ran up the stairs and hid in the closet, burying myself under a pile of coats. Downstairs, the front door cracked open. They were moving fast, and then one of them said, "Where is she?" Those words chilled me to the bone. They were after me. The stairs creaked. "You might as well come out," a mocking voice called. The knob on the closet door started to jiggle, and then I heard them. Sirens. Faint at first, but getting louder. The men downstairs swore. "It's the cops, let's go." In the end, the men pleaded guilty. But what I took away from that night is that being independent is also about understanding your own limits. The lesson I carry now is simple. Always trust your gut and never let a desire for money or freedom make you blind to the risks. Lying awake some nights, I still can't help but wonder what might have happened if the police had arrived just 2 minutes later. I was concluding my junior year at the University of Washington in Seattle. I had recently signed a lease for a tiny one-bedroom apartment off campus. It was the kind of place with peeling paint and a refrigerator that hummed ominously. Rent was due soon, and my bank account felt drier than the Sahara. My parents lived in a quiet suburb about 20 minutes east in Bellevue, and I had been staying in my old bedroom while searching for work. To drum up some cash, I decided to sell off the junk I had accumulated over the years. Mainly furniture from high school that no one would miss. I snapped a few blurry photos of my wooden dresser on my phone. It wasn't anything special. Tall, oak finish, chipped in places, with drawers that stuck if pulled too hard. I had bought it second-hand at a garage sale when I was 16. Solid dresser, $50. I typed that into the Craigslist ad, including my parents' address since I would be home alone that weekend. My mum and dad were heading to Portland for a family reunion. Specifically my grandma's 80th birthday. I pressed post and promptly forgot about it, scrolling through TikTok instead. The first response came that very afternoon. It was from a man named Mark. "Hey, I'm interested in the dresser. Is it still available? I can pick it up tomorrow if so." Simple enough. I texted back, "Yep, all yours for $50. Tomorrow works. How about 2 p.m.? he replied almost instantly. Perfect. Will you be home alone when I come to pick it up? I stared at the screen for a moment. It felt a bit off, like some random question from a dating app. Maybe he's just shy in groups, I thought. I assured myself, yeah, just me, and added a thumbs up emoji to keep things light. Cool. Which bedroom is it in? The one facing the street, I typed. Now that question twisted my stomach a bit. How did he know the house had a street-facing bedroom? I had shared the address, sure, but not the layout. Glancing out the window, I saw that our two-story colonial backed up against a wooded area. The front bedroom, which was mine, overlooked the quiet cul-de-sac. Yeah, that's the one, I replied, convincing myself he must have driven past. Craigslist weirdos were ubiquitous. I had seen enough Reddit stories about flaky buyers, but murderers. We settled on cash, no haggling involved. I didn't think much beyond that. The following day, I vacuumed the room, polished the dresser, and even spritzed some air freshener to camouflage any lingering musty basement odors. Around 1:45 p.m., I heard a car pull up, a silver Honda Civic. Nothing suspicious. The man who stepped out looked like any dad at a PTA meeting. Mid-40s, khakis, a faded mariner's hoodie, short brown hair speckled with grey. He unloaded a dolly and some bungee cords like he had done this 100 times before. Mark, I called from the porch, forcing a smile. Seattle's typical drizzle had begun, so I waved him in quickly. That's me, he said, his voice warm and gruff, reminiscent of a radio host. He shook my hand with a firm grip and avoided prolonged eye contact. You must be Alex. Nice place, two-story, right? He commented, seemingly examining the house. Looks solid from the street. Yeah. Thanks, I replied, leading him through the foyer, passing the living room with its worn leather couch and the kitchen island cluttered with my parents' coffee mugs. Up the stairs, second door on the left, I guided him. He followed closely, not saying much initially but glancing around. The dresser's right here, I said, gesturing to it pressed against the wall under the window with the curtains drawn halfway. He nodded, running his hand across the top. Good bones, a few scratches, but fixable. Then he knelt down, checking the drawers, which stuck just like I remembered, and he chuckled. These could use some WD-40. Have you lived here long? All my life, I said, leaning against the doorframe. Small talk felt natural. But I'm moving out soon, college apartment. Ah, University of Washington. Smart kid. He straightened up and pulled out a tattered wallet from his back pocket, counting out the $50 in crisp 20s like he had just withdrawn from an ATM. Here you go, he said, but it's heavier than it looks. Mind lending me a hand with loading it into the car? I said no problem, grabbed one end, and he took the other side. Together, we navigated it sideways down the stairs, bumping the banister once. In the foyer, he paused, glancing toward the front door. Yale locks, huh? Those deadbolts are tough. What about the back? Same setup, I replied, adjusting my grip as my arms began to ache. Yeah, pretty much. Why? I asked, a little confused. Just curious, he smiled, though the expression didn't reach his eyes. With an old house like this, you never know about security. We successfully maneuvered the dresser to his trunk. Once he popped it open, I saw a toolbox and some tarps inside, just the sort of thing you'd find at Home Depot. As we strapped it down, he took another glance at the house. Do your folks spend a lot of time here? Great layout for kids. Prime spot, but quiet neighborhood. They're away this weekend, I clarified. Usually home evenings, though. They work in the city. Got it. Safe travels when you move. He climbed into his car, waved, and drove off slowly, like he was memorizing the contours of the street. I lingered for a moment, the rain soaking my shirt, feeling an uneasy prickle on the back of my neck. But, I thought to myself, cash in hand, texting my roommate about splitting a pizza that night. My weekend passed without incident. My parents returned Sunday, raving about the reunion cake while I went to bed early. Monday rolled around, classes dragged by, critical psychology followed by a lab dissecting frog hearts. By Wednesday, I was back at their place, packing boxes in my room. The lingering unease about Mark's questions had faded to a slight itch, like an elusive memory. I even joked about it with my mom at dinner. Some Craigslist creep grilled me like a realtor, I said. She rolled her eyes. People are just nosy, lock up tight, that's all. Then that night, around 1 a.m, I woke up to a distinct click. Not loud but unmistakable, metal on metal right outside my door. I froze in bed, heart pounding. The house was old. Settling noises weren't unusual. Creaky floors, wind rustling the gutters. However, this felt different. An almost delicate twist, like someone testing the doorknob. I held my breath, straining for silence. After what felt like an eternity, I slipped out of bed, barefoot on the carpet, and pressed my ear against the door. Silence. My parents' door remained shut, with a faint sliver of light shining beneath it. Dad was likely engrossed in his CPAP machine humming softly. I checked my doorknob, locked as always. I returned to bed, and sleep did not come easily. I ended up scrolling through Instagram until my eyes burned, blaming it all on stress. Thursday arrived as usual, a rainy commute on the 550 bus and coffee from the campus cart that tasted like burnt rubber. That night, however, it happened again. At 2:17 a.m., I jolted awake once more. Heavy, deliberate footsteps on the wooden porch below my window. The side porch wrapped around the house, accessible from the backyard gate. I sat up, sheets twisting around me, peering through the blinds. Moonlight filtered through the clouds, casting shadows across the dewy boards. But no one was there, just the neighbor's sprinklers clicking away in the distance. I muttered to myself, "Porch cat," and flopped back down. We had strays occasionally knocking over pots, but cats didn't thud around like boots. The following morning, I mentioned it to Dad over breakfast. "I heard noises last night, like someone was out there." He sipped his black coffee, slightly folded his newspaper. "Maybe bears are coming down from the Cascades," he mused. "Bellevue butts right up against Greenbelt. Black bears wander into neighborhoods raiding trash cans." It seemed sensible. "I'll check the motion lights," he said. He did. Bulbs were functional, sensors were clean, and there were no tracks in the mud. "That's a relief," I said, relieved, and headed off to class. Yet that nagging doubt returned. Those steps seemed far too rhythmic and distinctively human. Saturday arrived, with my parents making a trip to Costco, leaving me to continue packing. I blasted a playlist of current hits, then reverted to some timeless Nirvana to match Seattle's vibe while taping boxes. Around noon, the noises began early. Not steps this time, but a scraping sound, as if a key was being manipulated in the locked back door downstairs. I paused the music, pulse quickening. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling. No reply. I snatched my phone and tentatively crept to the top of the stairs, glancing toward the kitchen door, which was shut tight with a gleaming deadbolt. I twisted it, locked as expected. "Wind," I whispered, wondering if gusts could rattle the frame. Then something caught my eye. The window by the stairs, which faced the side yard, had its blinds halfway open, clearly left unshut by me. Had I? I asked myself, yanking them shut with trembling hands. That night, things escalated again. At 11:45 p.m., I was doom-scrolling through Reddit in bed when the door handle tested itself. Slow, deliberate twists back and forth. My mouth went dry. Something was off. I jumped to my feet, reaching for the lamp. As light splashed through the room, posters of Radiohead curled at their edges while my desk sat piled high with textbooks. Carefully, I cracked my door open. "Dad?" I called quietly down the hall, only to hear him snoring softly in their room. I padded to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. Looking in the mirror, I was stunned to see dark circles under my eyes and my complexion pale. "You're losing it, Alex. Just final stress." Yet Sunday morning over pancakes, I spilled my worries. The clicks, the steps, now this. Mom's fork halted mid-air. "We should have gotten that Ring camera sooner. Let's call the cops." It was definitely a worthy option. Dad agreed, his expression serious. Or it could be some neighborhood kids pulling pranks. The officer who visited was a bored fellow named Rodriguez. His badge glimmered beneath the foyer light as he walked the premises, trained attention fixed on the bushes. "No footprints. Everything seems intact." "Yale locks. Solid choice," he commented, reassuring me. "Might just be animals. Consider setting up a trail camera if you're paranoid about safety." We took his advice, Dad mounting an affordable Wise camera on the porch post that very afternoon. It connected to his phone. Afterward, I realized how foolish I'd felt for worrying too much. Monday classes glided by in a blur while a professor droned on about Freud. I took scattered notes about that night, each apparent lack of distraction offering a return to normalcy. No noises interrupted my peace that night, just soothing silence and rain drumming against the roof, leading me to fall into a heavy and dreamless sleep. But on Tuesday, at 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. Wise alert. My heart crashed against my ribs as I snatched it. Grainy black and white footage revealing motion on the side porch. A shadow moved, tall and upright. Distinctly not a bear, hovering near my window. seemingly listening before winking out of sight toward the backyard gate. I bolted upright, hurrying to wake my parents. "Someone's outside," I exclaimed, my voice unsteady. This time, Dad dialed 911. The police arrived quickly, 2 squad cars with lights bathing the street in blue and red. They scoured the yard, discovering a bent nail beside the gate latch. The intruder hadn't broken in, likely staking out for a potential burglary, remarked the younger officer, a woman with a ponytail who looked at me keenly. "Have you sold anything online lately? Furniture?" My blood turned to ice. "Yeah, a dresser. Last week," she nodded knowingly. "It happens more often than people think. Stalkers use ads to check out houses, the layouts, daily habits." I showed her the text conversation with Mark. She snapped photos of the exchange. "We'll trace the number, change your locks, and consider moving out as soon as possible." They eventually vacated, leaving behind a thick cloud of paranoia. I positioned myself at the window, blinds drawn, ears heightened to every creak. It finally dawned on me. The dresser wasn't the focal point. It was Mark's asking questions. Quirky inquiries about locks and our family routine. He'd effectively mapped my life, paying $50 for a roadmap of our existence. Wednesday arrived early, with a locksmith who installed heavy, shiny new deadbolts. I narrowly avoided my psychology class, frantically tossing belongings into trash bags and packing up my hatchback with books. It was hectic. Mom wrapped me in a tight embrace by the door, whispering to call every night. "Love you." My new apartment smelled of fresh paint with takeout from the Thai place downstairs. At night, I triple-checked the chain and wedged a chair beneath the doorknob. There was no porch, no side yard, only a fire escape with a glimpse of alley dumpsters. Yet at 2:01 a.m., I woke in a cold sweat when a notification chimed. Was it just my phone slipping off the pillow? The lurking noises followed me into my dreams. Clicks resonating, steps growing nearer, and weeks bled together in a blur. The police traced Mark's number to a burner phone. It was a dead end. No results on the vehicle or any potential leads. I felt backed into a corner, changing my number and deleting my Craigslist account. My roommate jokingly mentioned something about a serial killer fan club, but I laughed it off. Yet I delayed showers and stared too long at casting shadows, feeling as though they were inching closer to encircle me in their relentless grasp. I've lived a normal life in the city for the last several years. It's pretty much where I stayed all day every day. I owned a condo only a couple of miles from my job, so everything was really convenient, and I had no reason to ever leave the area. This week, though, I had a couple of problems with my condo that were beginning to really bother me, and it would have been way overpriced to hire someone to fix them. But I didn't have any tools myself, so to save as much money as possible, I went onto Craigslist to check if anyone was selling some second-hand toolkits. It was about time I got one anyway. Surprisingly, there were a ton of them. Some were worse deals than others, but I just needed some basic things. So, I continued looking until I found something that seemed decent. A lightly used toolkit with everything I would need for a respectable price. I sent an email, and in just 15 minutes, we were set up to meet. The guy said I could come by his place tomorrow to pick it up whenever I was free. I worked until 7, but I usually like to stay up late anyway, so that was fine with me. His address was pretty far though, at least for me. It was 45 minutes outside the city, in a very small town I'd somehow never even heard of. It looked like just 100 or so houses, all clumped together in one area on the satellite view of the map. Come the next day after work, I made the drive out of the city. The roads were quite empty and honestly, kind of nice once I was away from all the buildings. It was well after sundown when I began to get close. It seemed to be mostly wooded areas with only a few gas stations and shops around. The neighborhood that I pulled into was sketchy, to say the least. All of the houses were mixed in with the woods, and they were very clearly old. They looked as if they had been there for more than 100 years and had really not had any renovations done. Some of them definitely looked abandoned. This had me a little put off as I drove on through the wooded road and finally arrived at the address the guy had sent me. It looked no different from all the other homes. Small, old, and just barely standing. Although I felt a bit uneasy about this neighborhood, I had it in the back of my mind that I was very much a city person and wasn't used to places like this. So I thought maybe it wasn't as bad as I was making it out to be. I parked at the end of the driveway and got out. I noticed right away how quiet it was. It was so silent that it felt unnatural. There were no people outside, or sounds coming from any of the houses, or even any cars driving by, just dead silence. I walked up to the house and gave a knock on the door. I had this strange feeling as I stood on the porch and waited that made me keep glancing behind me. But the door opened after a minute. The guy who answered was about average in height with longish brown hair and a beard that was unkempt. He certainly didn't look the most put together. He showed me inside and led me over to the living room, where a thick tool bag holding all the tools he was selling was sitting on the couch. One thing that made the whole situation feel even more eerie was that there were basically no lights on inside the house. In the living room, there was only a single lamp that barely produced anything more than shadows. Also, as we were walking into the living room, I noticed the back door by the hallway was hanging on its hinges, like it was completely broken in the doorway that led outside. I didn't really know what to look for when it came to the kit, but honestly, I just wanted to pay him for it and get out of there. I pretended to look through it, but then I just pulled out my cash and turned around to hand it to him when I noticed he was gone. The room was empty. Where the hell did this guy go? I called out his name, but the house was extremely quiet. There were slight creaks coming from the walls and floors all around, but I couldn't tell if it was just the old house settling or something else. I felt my adrenaline start to spike. I think my gut knew that this was a really bad situation. I called out for him one last time. As I slowly started making my way back to the front door, I left the tools behind. But just as I got into the hallway, someone was standing there. It was a different guy. I couldn't see him very well because he stood in the shadows, but I could tell he was noticeably wider and taller than the other guy. I was just heading to my car to get some money. "If that's okay," I said casually, hoping he would just get out of the way and let me pass. He didn't reply. The way he stood was like he was blocking the hallway on purpose. I stood there trying to figure out what I should do, but just a second later, I heard a creak to my right. I turned my head. The room next to me was pitch black. I think it was the kitchen, if I had to guess, but it was honestly so dark in there, I couldn't be sure. Somehow, in that moment, my survival instincts just took over, and I sprinted towards the broken back door I remembered seeing. As I ran from the house, I heard several loud creaks that definitely sounded like footsteps running right behind me. Thankfully, the house had no fence, so I was able to just run right around it and back to the front. As I was running back up towards my car, someone jumped out from behind it and started running away. I didn't know what they were up to, but I knew I needed to leave, so I just unlocked my car, got in, and floored it out of there. For a while after that, I was still under an adrenaline rush. I'm pretty sure there were multiple people inside that house, and that one of them was trying to either break into my car or stop it from running so I wouldn't be able to get away. I can't say for sure what they intended to do, but if I hadn't gotten out of there when I did, I'm not confident I ever would have. It all started with a completely ordinary online ad. I had just made up my mind to sell my 2006 Honda CR-V. It wasn't a fancy vehicle or anything, but it was dependable, had a clean title, no significant mechanical problems, and still had a lot of life in it. Even with 200,000 miles on the odometer, the paint on the hood was a little faded, and the AC would sometimes make a strange rattling sound when it first turned on, but there were no major issues. I had taken good care of it over the years, oil changes, tire rotations, brake pads, all done on schedule. I had just bought a newer car a few weeks prior and didn't want the old one just sitting there gathering dust. So I decided to list it on Craigslist. That was where I'd bought it years before, and my experiences with the site had been mostly positive. People always say it's a sketchy place, but if you take precautions, it's usually fine, or at least that's what I believed. I took about 10 photos of the interior, the exterior, the odometer, and even under the hood. Then I wrote a straightforward and honest description. I said a reasonable price of $2,800. Nothing that would raise suspicion, not too cheap, just a fair price. The ad was posted on a Thursday afternoon. I didn't hear anything for the rest of the day, but the next morning, at around 10:30 a.m., I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Hey, saw your ad for the CR-V. My name's Tony. I've been looking for one of these. Still available?" I texted back, "Yep, still have it. Want to come take a look?" He replied almost right away. "Yes, I can come by tomorrow night after work around 8:30 or 9. Is that okay?" I hesitated for a moment. It wasn't out of the ordinary for people to come by late, especially if they had unusual work schedules. Still, the idea of a stranger coming over that late at night gave me pause. But I lived in a fairly large apartment complex on the edge of West Grove, a quiet suburban area. My car was already parked in the open lot, so he wouldn't even need to come near my apartment door. I replied, "That's fine. Just meet me in the parking lot. I'll be by the car." "Cool. See you then," he texted back. At the time, nothing about the exchange seemed like a red flag. The next day, I cleaned up the car's interior, vacuumed it, wiped everything down, and cleared out my personal items from the glove box and center console. At about 8:15, I put on a hoodie and went downstairs to wait by the car. It was dark, but it wasn't so late that it felt unsettling. There were still people out walking their dogs or getting home from work. I stood next to my CRV, scrolling through my phone while keeping an eye on every car that entered the lot. At exactly 8:58, a black Dodge Charger with tinted windows pulled into the lot. It drove slowly past me and then parked in a visitor spot 3 spaces away. The driver's door opened and a tall man got out. He appeared to be in his mid-30s, maybe a bit older, with a bald head, a muscular build, and numerous tattoos on his forearms. He was wearing a black Carhartt jacket and dark jeans. He had a kind of intense presence about him, as if he was always on the verge of an argument, even when he wasn't speaking. But he smiled as he approached. "You're the one selling the CRV?" he asked, his voice a little deeper than I had anticipated. "Yeah," I said, forcing a polite smile. "You must be Tony." "Yep," he said. He walked around the car, inspecting the body. "Looks clean. Been driving it a lot. Mostly just back and forth to work. It's been a solid car for years. No leaks, no overheating. I had the timing belt replaced at $180,000. I've got the paperwork if you want to see it." He nodded and took out a small flashlight to check the tires. "Can I look under the hood?" "Sure," I said and popped the latch. We went through the typical routine. He asked a few standard questions. He didn't come across as a car expert, but he knew enough to seem like a serious buyer. "Mind if I take it for a quick spin?" he asked. "I'll need to come with you," I said without thinking. "It's just company policy." I tried to laugh, but he didn't join in. Tony grinned, but it was a smile with no warmth. "No problem." We got into the car. I gave him directions around the block and then down the main street so he could test the acceleration. It wasn't a very long drive, maybe 10 minutes, but the silence made it feel much longer. He didn't say much, just stared straight ahead with a tense jaw. "I like it," he said at last. "Feels solid." When we returned, he pulled into the same parking spot as before. I got out, feeling optimistic. "So, what do you think?" I asked. He looked at me for a second. "Yeah, I'll think about it," he said, his tone flat. I blinked. "Oh, okay, sure." And then he asked casually, "Hey, would it be okay if I used your bathroom real quick before I go?" That moment seemed to freeze in time. It was like a record scratch in a movie. Every single one of my instincts went on high alert. Yeah, I'd rather not," I said, making sure to keep my voice steady. "It's nothing personal. I just don't let strangers into my apartment." Tony didn't say anything at first. He just gave me a hard look. His smile disappeared. There was a stretch of awkward silence. Then he gave a slow nod. "All right, no worries." I gave a small wave and started to walk away. I didn't go to the nearest side entrance as I usually would. Instead, I walked around the building to the main entrance, just to be safe. When I got to the front doors, I glanced back. There was no one behind me. Feeling relieved, I went inside. The lobby was quiet. I walked to the elevator, pushed the button, and waited. When the doors opened, I got in, pressed the button for the 3rd floor, and leaned back against the wall. The ride to my floor took less than 30 seconds. When I stepped out, I turned left toward my apartment and stopped dead. At the far end of the hallway, the door to the stairwell opened. Tony walked through it. At first, I thought, or hoped, that it was just someone who looked like him, but I knew it wasn't. It was definitely him. The same jacket, the same way of walking, the same unreadable expression. My blood turned to ice. I didn't say a word. I just turned around and started walking quickly in the other direction. I tried not to break into a run, but then I heard it. Footsteps, fast and heavy, right behind me. I ran then, a full-on sprint to the other end of the hallway. I didn't even think. I pushed open the stairwell door and bolted down the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear him behind me, closer than I wanted. Down 2 flights of stairs, and then into the underground garage. The echo of our footsteps filled the concrete space. My lungs were burning. I didn't run to my car. I wasn't sure if I would have time to unlock it. Instead, I ran to the next stairwell, slammed the door shut behind me, and raced up to the ground floor. When I burst out of the exit door on the side of the building, the cold air hit my face. I ran across the parking lot to my CRV. With a shaking hand, I unlocked it, jumped inside, locked the doors, and turned the key. The engine started. I sped out of the parking lot and called 911. The dispatcher stayed on the phone with me as I drove around the nearby streets. I explained what had happened, described Tony, his car, everything. 5 minutes later, I saw flashing lights back at the apartment complex. I drove back slowly and parked on the street. Tony's Charger was still there. The officers found him trying to pry open the patio door of a first-floor apartment. He didn't have any tools, any friends with him, or any money on him. He had no real intention of buying a car. That night, I understood just how close I had come to letting something terrible happen. He had never planned to buy anything. That car ad was just the bait. What he wanted was an address, a face, and a specific window of time. I deleted the Craigslist ad that night. I never used the site again, and now, anytime I sell something online, I meet the person in the parking lot of the police department. No exceptions. There's a specific type of heat to a Phoenix spring. I recall those days back in 2017 vividly, mostly because my life was so predictable. At 26, I was putting in long hours at a local auto body shop. The pay was decent, but nearly all of it was eaten up by rent and bills. My only real splurge was my Friday nights in front of the TV. My main problem was my television, an old hand-me-down that was barely working. The screen would flicker, the colors were off, and the sound would die randomly. One night after work, I was scrolling through Craigslist, and that's when I found it. A 65-inch Samsung Smart TV listed as like new for only $300. The pictures looked amazing. The description was simple. Selling because I'm moving. Works perfectly. Cash only. A part of me recognized it was probably a scam, but the other part, the one tired of my old TV, was tempted. The following evening, I drove to a part of Phoenix I rarely visited. The neighborhood was run down, and my gut started to feel uneasy. I found the address, and the front door opened before I could even knock. A stocky man in his 40s waved me in. "You must be Eric," he said. "TV's this way." His voice was abrupt and impatient. The first thing I noticed inside was the smell, a mix of stale cigarette smoke and something like old food. The TV was against one wall, looking massive. "Is it okay if we turn it on?" I asked. After a few clicks, the screen came to life with static, followed by a washed-out, discolored menu. I frowned. "That doesn't look right." Tom's tone got sharp. "It works fine. So, are you buying it or what?" The way he snapped at me made my stomach churn. "I'm going to have to pass," I said politely. As I turned to leave, Tom followed me. "Wait a second," he said in a lower voice. "You're not just going to come all this way and waste my time." He stepped closer, blocking the hallway. "How about $250 or $200? You know what? I'll let you have it for $150. That drastic price drop was a massive red flag. "Tell you what," I said, trying to sound casual. "I don't have the cash with me at the moment." He stared at me for a long moment, then finally moved. "Fine." I walked quickly to the door, resisting the urge to run. When I got back to my apartment, I was just relieved to be home safely. My curiosity led me to look up Craigslist scams, and I found countless stories just like mine. It hit me then, just how close I had come to a dangerous situation. The lesson that has stayed with me is simple. If a deal seems too good to be true, it almost certainly is. There is no deal out there worth risking your safety for. Some of the most difficult years of my life weren't shaped by what I didn't have, but by what I was unable to give. In the summer of 2012, I was 34, a single dad, working myself to the bone in Dayton, Ohio. I left for the warehouse every day before sunrise and got home long after dark. My back was always sore from lifting boxes, and my hands were cracked from the dry air. It was just enough to keep the lights on, pay the rent, and have enough groceries in the fridge. But it wasn't enough to provide my daughter, Isa, with the things she truly deserved. Isabella, who insisted everyone call her Isa, was 10 years old back then. She was full of energy and had big brown eyes that saw more than I wished they did. She possessed a quiet resilience, something she got from her mother before she left our lives. It sometimes scared me how much Isa understood. She was aware that money was tight. She never threw a fit when I had to say no to new toys or fast food. But when she asked for a new bike, the mix of hope and shame in her voice, as if she already expected the answer to be no, just broke my heart. Her old bike was ridiculously small for her, A faded pink thing with peeling stickers and tassels that had lost their shimmer long ago. She would wobble down the street, her knees nearly up to her chest, while other kids in the neighborhood zoomed past on their shiny mountain bikes. Months before, I had promised her, "As soon as I can save up some extra cash, kiddo, we'll get you a bike that fits." But over time, the warehouse had dried up, and extra cash was just a fantasy. Every night when I came home exhausted, she would ask if I'd had a chance to look for one. I would just ruffle her hair, say, "Soon," and then retreat to the kitchen where the bills sat waiting on the table like vultures. It was guilt, more than anything else, that led me to scroll through Craigslist late one night after work. I didn't have hundreds of dollars to spend, but I thought maybe, just maybe, I could find something used that was good enough to make her smile again. That's when I spotted the listing, a purple Schwinn mountain bike, barely used in perfect condition for just $40. The photo was sharp, the paint gleamed, and for a moment I suspected it might be a scam. But the ad included a phone number, and my fingers started typing before my brain could stop them. "Hi, is the purple bike still available?" The reply was almost immediate. "Yes, you can pick it up tomorrow evening. $40 cash only." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen's glow. For the first time in a long time, it felt like I'd caught a lucky break. The next day at work, I could barely concentrate. I went through the motions of hauling pallets and stacking boxes. But all I could think about was the look on Issa's face when she finally saw that bike. It was the first time in months I had looked forward to something that wasn't just a paycheck. After my shift, I picked her up and told her we had to run an errand. She guessed we were going for groceries, or maybe to get gas. But when I got on the highway and told her we were going to get her a new bike, her squeal of joy filled the car like a ray of sunlight. We drove to a part of town I didn't recognize. The streets got quieter and the houses got smaller. Eventually, we turned onto a cul-de-sac where a man was waving from a cluttered garage. His name was Mark. He was in his mid-40s with thinning hair and a polite smile that didn't quite seem genuine. "There it is," he said, rolling the bike toward us. The purple frame was shining, and the tires looked like they'd hardly been used. My niece barely touched it, outgrew it too fast. Issa ran up to it like it was Christmas morning. She hopped on the seat, her small hands gripping the handlebars. "Dad, it's perfect." I tested the brakes and spun the wheels. Everything seemed to be in good working order. For $40, it felt like a miracle. I handed him the cash, and Mark quickly stuffed it into his pocket. As we were loading the bike into the trunk, Issa leaned against me, grinning from ear to ear. "Thanks, Dad, really." For once, I felt like I had actually kept a promise. For once, I didn't feel like a failure. The next afternoon, Issa could barely contain her excitement. She begged me to let her ride it as soon as she got home from school. The sun was beating down on our quiet street, and the cicadas were buzzing in the trees as I sat on the porch steps to watch her. She looked radiant, her hair flowing behind her as she pedaled, her laughter trailing in the warm air. I remember thinking, finally, I've given her something normal. Then I heard it, a sharp, unnatural crack, followed by a scream that tore right through me. I bolted down the driveway. Issa was twisted on the asphalt, clutching her leg. Blood was soaking through her sock, pouring from a deep gash. The pedal lay on the ground beside her, snapped clean off. "Dad!" she sobbed, her voice raw with pain. I scooped her up, my heart pounding, my thoughts focused on one thing, getting her help. My old Corolla roared down the street, hazards flashing, until we skidded into the ER parking lot. Nurses rushed her inside, their calm voices a stark contrast to the terror that was consuming me. The next few hours were a blur of stitches, antiseptic, and Issa's trembling hand holding mine. The doctor reassured me that the wound wasn't life-threatening. No broken bones, just a deep cut, but she would have a scar. I nodded, feeling numb, replaying the moment of her fall over and over in my head. That crack, that scream, my failure to keep her safe. When we finally returned home, she limped to her room, looking pale and shaken. I went out to the garage and just sat there, staring at the broken pedal. A question started to form in my mind. How could something that looked so new break so catastrophically? The next morning, I flipped the bike over and examined it like a detective, and that's when I saw it, faintly stamped on the underside of the frame. Words that made my blood run cold. Recall, do not use. I grabbed my phone and did a search. There it was, in black and white. Schwinn models recalled nationwide for defective pedals that could detach mid-ride. The recall had been issued months ago, which meant Mark had to have known. He must have. I texted him immediately. That bike was recalled. My daughter got injured. Did you know? The reply came within minutes. Not my problem. You bought it as is. My vision clouded with rage. I called him repeatedly, but he never picked up. When I filed a police report, they just shrugged. Craigslist sales are a legal grey area, the officer explained. Unless you can prove he intended to cause harm, there's not much we can do. Not much they could do, perhaps. But there was something I could do. I collected every piece of evidence I could find. Photos of the broken pedal, Issa's hospital bills, the recall notice. I met with a lawyer, a cost that strained me, but I was fueled by a father's protective anger. For weeks, I fought. I balanced 12-hour shifts with endless paperwork, all to ensure someone was held accountable for what had happened. Finally, faced with the threat of a lawsuit, Mark gave in. He agreed to a settlement, barely enough to cover the medical bills. But it was an admission of guilt nonetheless. One night I got a short email from him. It was just 2 sentences. I'm sorry for what happened. I shouldn't have sold it. I just needed the money. Issa eventually healed. The jagged scar on her shin became a permanent part of her, but her spirit took longer to recover. She refused to go near another bike for months. Whenever we passed kids riding in the neighborhood, she would look away, her shoulders tensing up. The freedom that bike was supposed to give her had turned into fear. I kept that broken pedal in a shoebox on a shelf in the garage, a constant reminder of how close I came to losing her. Looking back on that summer, I see things differently now. I had thought I was just failing as a provider, unable to buy her the things she needed. But the truth is, my desperation to give her something good nearly cost me something far more valuable than money. Craigslist had seemed like a simple solution, a shortcut, but I learned that shortcuts often conceal hidden dangers. Behind every deal that seems too good to be true, there could be someone who knows more than they're letting on, someone willing to put others at risk for a few extra dollars. The scar on Issa's leg became a part of her story, and a part of mine as well. It reminded me that being a father isn't about giving your child everything she wants. It's about keeping her safe, even from things that glitter in the sun and look like a gift. The moral I learned from all this is simple, and I share it often. Protect the ones you love by questioning things that seem too easy. If it looks too good to be true, it probably is, and there is no bargain in the world that is worth more than the safety of your child.